All right, so let's dive into this. You sent over some pretty intense documentation here about some vulnerabilities in Palo Alto Networks PAN-OS software.
Yeah.
And we're talking about CVE 2024-0001 and CVE 2024-9474.
Right.
And get this, they're being actively exploited like right now.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a cause for concern.
Yeah,
Um,
that's not good.
what makes these vulnerabilities particularly dangerous is that they're not just theoretical weaknesses, they're being actively exploited in the wild.
Wow.
Um, and security researchers have actually given this whole a name for this campaign. They're calling it Operation Lunar Peek.
Operation Lunar Peek?
Yeah.
That sounds kind of like a spy movie or something.
Yeah, it does have a certain ring to it.
It does.
But before we get into the, sort of the spy thriller aspect of it all,
Right.
can you remind me again what exactly these vulnerabilities do? I'm already getting lost in all the CVE numbers.
Yeah.
It's tough to keep track.
Yeah, so
Sometimes.
CVE 2024-0012 basically allows an attacker to bypass the firewall's authentication. So like picking the lock to your front door.
Right.
And then CVE 2024-9474 allows them to escalate privileges to the root level. So that gives them basically keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, so it's a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
First, they bypass the authentication, they sneak in, and then they escalate their privileges to gain full control.
Yeah, and that's unsettling, to say the least.
Yeah, that is.
So what kinds of systems are we talking about here? Are these vulnerabilities affecting all Palo Alto Networks products?
Thankfully, no cloud and GFW and Prisma access seem to be in the clear.
Okay.
But PA series, VM series, and CN series firewalls, along with Panorama and Wildfire appliances,
Wow.
running PAN-OS versions 10.1 to 11.2, are all vulnerable.
Okay, so that's a lot of systems potentially.
Yeah, it's a significant number of devices that could be impacted.
Yeah. All right, so we need to understand how these vulnerabilities work. So let's start with CVE 2024-0012.
Go ahead.
The one that bypasses the authentication.
Right.
How is that even possible?
So this vulnerability actually exploits a misconfiguration in Nginx,
Oh.
which is the web server software that PAN-OS uses.
Right.
So imagine the firewall has like a security checkpoint, right?
Okay.
You need the right credentials to pass.
Yeah.
But with this vulnerability, an attacker can slip in a special HTTP header. Think of it like a fake pass.
Okay.
And the firewall just waves them through.
So they're tricking the firewall into thinking that they're authorized.
Exactly. It's a very sneaky tactic.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's a clever exploitation of a seemingly minor misconfiguration.
Okay, what about CVE 2024-9474? How does that escalate privileges?
So this one stems from a command injection vulnerability
Okay.
in the audit-log.php file.
Right.
And it's a classic security flaw where the system takes user input,
Mm-hmm.
in this case it's a username,
Okay.
and uses it to build a command without properly checking it.
So the attacker can slip in malicious code.
Exactly. They can embed malicious code within that username,
Wow.
and the system blindly executes it with root privileges.
So you're telling me that the system is taking orders from the attacker because of this vulnerability?
You got it.
Oh, man.
It's a stark reminder that even a simple oversight, like not sanitizing user input,
Right.
can have these devastating consequences.
Yeah.
It's like handing a stranger the controls to your most critical systems.
That's a little scary.
It is a bit unnerving.
So this Operation Lunar Peek that we talked about earlier,
Right.
are these vulnerabilities being used in that?
Yes, so Operation Lunar Peek is the name that security researchers have given to a series of attacks that are exploiting these very vulnerabilities.
So someone is out there actively targeting these systems.
That's right.
What are they doing once they're in? What's the end goal?
Unfortunately, the attacker's motives aren't entirely clear just yet. It could be anything from stealing sensitive data to using the compromised firewall as a launching pad for further attacks.
So it really could be anything.
It's hard to say for sure at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on, can we take a step back and explain what Panorama is?
Sure.
You mentioned it's affected by these vulnerabilities,
Right.
but what is it exactly?
So Panorama is a centralized management platform for Palo Alto Networks firewalls.
Okay.
So it allows administrators to manage multiple firewalls from a single location.
Okay.
It's a very powerful tool for security teams.
Right.
But as we're seeing, these vulnerabilities make it a target for attackers as well.
So if Panorama is compromised, an attacker could potentially control a whole network of firewalls.
That's right.
from just a single point.
Potentially, yes.
So that really amplifies the risk here.
It does, significantly.
What makes Panorama particularly vulnerable in this situation?
So there's a feature in Panorama called Jump Into,
Okay.
which allows admins to seamlessly access the web interfaces of individual firewalls that they manage.
Okay.
It's a very convenient feature,
Right.
but unfortunately, it's also been exploited.
No.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, as many convenient features can be.
So how are the attackers using this jump into functionality to their advantage?
So they're essentially forging sessions and impersonating users with high-level privileges.
Uh-huh.
It's as if they're creating fake VIP passes
Right.
to gain access to restricted areas.
Wow.
And once they're in, they can potentially exploit CVE 2024-9474 to gain complete control of the firewall,
Right.
and then use Jump Into to move laterally across the network, compromising other firewalls under Panorama's management.
So they get in and then they can spread throughout the network.
Exactly. They can spread laterally and compromise multiple devices.
So this isn't hypothetical. Is there evidence of these attacks actually happening out there in the real world?
Yes, there's concrete evidence. The Unit 42 threat brief that we have details actual attacks.
Okay.
For example, they found a PHP web shell payload with a very specific SHA-256 hash on a compromised firewall.
Oh, wow.
Think of a web shell as that backdoor that attackers install to maintain persistent access and control.
So even if the vulnerability is patched, if they've already installed this web shell, they still have access.
That's a possibility, yes.
Oh, man, that's a little scary.
It's a sobering reminder that patching vulnerabilities is only one part of the solution.
Right.
You need to be proactive in detecting and removing any malware that may have already been installed.
Okay, what else did this Unit 42 report say about these attacks?
They also identified a suspicious user agent string,
Okay.
which is kind of like a browser's fingerprint, if you will.
Uh-huh.
It was Mozilla 5.0, Windows NT 6.3, Triton 7.0, RV 11.0, like
Wow.
Gecko. And this popped up in multiple exploit attempts.
Okay.
So this kind of detail can help security researchers track attackers and understand their methods.
So even these little details can give some clues.
Exactly. They can provide valuable insights into the attacker's behavior.
Okay, wow. So we've covered how these vulnerabilities work,
Right.
the impact that they can have, and now even evidence that they're being used in actual attacks.
Yes, it's a serious situation.
It is. So I think maybe we should shift gears a little bit
Sure.
and talk about what people can actually do to protect themselves.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
What are the most important steps to take?
Well, the first and most crucial step is patching.
Okay.
Palo Alto Networks has released fixes for both CVE 2024-0012 and CVE 2024-9474.
Okay.
So there's really no excuse for delaying that update.
So patch, patch, patch.
Exactly.
But is patching enough? It seems like there's a lot more to it than just patching.
You're right. Patching is really just the beginning.
Okay.
You also need to restrict access to the management interface.
Okay.
Ideally, it shouldn't be accessible from the internet at all.
Right, so it's like locking your front door. You don't want to leave it wide open.
Exactly. A good analogy.
What if someone needs remote access? How do you do that securely?
So if remote access is unavoidable, you need to make it as secure as possible.
Right.
You should be using VPNs,
Okay.
enforce multi-factor authentication, and only allow connections from trusted IP addresses.
Okay.
It's all about adding layers of security to make it much harder for an attacker to breach your defenses.
So patching, securing the management interface, those are the top priorities?
Absolutely.
But I have a feeling there's a lot more to consider here.
Oh, there is a lot more.
What else should people be thinking about?
Well, we need to delve deeper into technical mitigations. We need to explore real-world attack scenarios and discuss proactive measures that organizations can take to stay ahead of the curve.
All right, so we've got a lot more ground to cover.
We do.
This is turning into quite the adventure, this deep dive.
It is.
Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be back with part 2 to uncover more about these vulnerabilities and how to stay secure.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. So last time we uncovered some pretty alarming vulnerabilities in these Palo Alto Networks firewalls.
Yeah.
But now I want to get into how attackers exploit these weaknesses. You know?
Like we're putting on our detective hats and analyzing the attacker's playbook.
Exactly. So let's start with CVE 2024-0001.
Okay.
That authentication bypass we talked about.
Right.
We know that it involves manipulating this HTTP header, but how did security researchers even discover this vulnerability?
Well, they often use a technique called fuzzing.
Okay.
And it involves bombarding a system with like random or unexpected data.
So you mean like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing with sticks?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
By observing how the system reacts to this barrage of data, researchers can actually pinpoint vulnerabilities that might otherwise go unnoticed.
So they're intentionally trying to make the system crash or behave strangely?
Yeah, in a very controlled way, of course.
Right.
It's kind of like stress testing a bridge to find weak points.
Oh, okay, I see. So in this case, the fuzzing revealed that a specific HTTP header wasn't being checked.
Yeah, that's how they figured out how to bypass the authentication.
Wow, okay, so the attacker is in now what? How do they then escalate privileges using CVE 2024-9474?
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Remember, this vulnerability allows for command injection.
Right.
Attackers figured out how to embed malicious code within the username field of a script that handles audit logs.
Okay, but wouldn't the system recognize that the username is actually a command?
Well, the problem is the script wasn't properly sanitizing the input.
Okay.
It was blindly taking whatever was entered in that field and using it to construct a command.
Right.
No questions asked.
Oh.
So the attacker's code gets executed with root privileges.
So they basically hijacked the system's own logging mechanism
Exactly.
to give themselves like ultimate power.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh man, what kind of malicious code are we talking about here? What would an attacker do once they had this level of access?
Well, they're not going to be obvious and start deleting files.
Yeah.
Or shutting down the system.
Right.
Instead, they often use a technique called a reverse shell.
A reverse shell?
Yeah, it allows them to establish a secret connection back to their own machine.
Wait, so you mean they create like a hidden tunnel out of your system and back to their computer?
Precisely.
Wow.
It's like building a secret escape route right under everyone's noses.
So even if you patch the vulnerabilities later, if they've already set up this reverse shell, they still have access?
Yeah, potentially.
Oh man, that's a little scary.
It highlights the importance of proactive security measures.
Right. So what can people do to try to mitigate that risk?
Well, one crucial step is to restrict access to the management interface.
Okay.
Make sure it's only accessible from trusted IP addresses within your network.
So like having a very strict doorman at your server room?
Exactly, a great analogy.
But what if remote access to the management interface is absolutely necessary?
Well, in those cases, you need to layer on additional security measures.
Right.
Employ VPNs to encrypt the connection.
Okay.
Enforce multi-factor authentication for an extra layer of verification.
Right.
And only allow connections from a whitelist of trusted IP addresses.
So it's all about making it more difficult for an attacker.
Yeah, putting up multiple roadblocks.
Okay, what other security measures should people be thinking about? I'm guessing there's a lot more to it than just securing the management interface.
You're absolutely right. It's a multi-layered approach.
Right.
Intrusion detection and prevention systems,
Okay.
or IDPS, as they're often called.
Okay.
These are really vital.
What do they do?
They act like security cameras and alarms for your network.
Okay.
They're constantly monitoring traffic for any suspicious activity.
So they can spot an attack that's in progress.
Right.
And either block it or alert someone.
Exactly. And these systems are becoming increasingly sophisticated.
Wow.
Many now use AI and machine learning to identify patterns of malicious behavior.
Really?
And even predict attacks before they happen.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's really cutting-edge technology.
But I imagine that these systems require a lot of maintenance and updating.
They do. It's crucial to keep them updated with the latest signatures and rules, because attackers are always developing new methods.
Right.
You need to make sure your defenses can keep up.
It's like updating the software on your computer, you know?
Exactly. You've got to stay current to stay protected.
Okay, but technology can only go so far, right? What about the human element? People make mistakes all the time. How do we address that?
You've hit on a really critical point. Even with the most advanced technology, human error can still create vulnerabilities.
Right.
That's why strong security policies and procedures are essential.
Okay, so we're talking about rules and guidelines for how employees should use technology.
Yeah, and how they should handle sensitive data.
Right.
And it goes beyond just having, like, a written policy.
Okay.
You need to make sure that these policies are actually enforced.
Right.
That they're regularly reviewed and updated
Yeah.
to reflect the ever-changing threat landscape.
So it's like having a security playbook that everyone needs to follow.
Exactly.
So even with the best playbook, people need to be trained on how to execute it.
Absolutely. Security awareness training is paramount.
Okay.
You need to equip your employees with the knowledge and skills to recognize threats,
Right.
to follow security protocols, and to report any suspicious activity.
So it's about empowering employees to be active participants in defending the organization.
Precisely. Make the training engaging, make it relevant.
Okay.
Use real-world example simulations,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even gamify it a little bit.
Right.
The more you can make it stick, the stronger your human firewall will be.
Okay, so we've talked about securing the management interface,
Right.
intrusion detection systems, strong policies, and employee training.
It's a lot.
It's a lot,
Yeah.
but it's clear that cybersecurity requires a holistic approach.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about technology. It's about people, processes, and culture.
Right.
You need all three working in harmony to create a truly secure environment.
It's like a symphony orchestra. You need all the instruments playing together.
That's a great analogy.
Speaking of working together, we mentioned Operation Lunar Peek, which is exploiting these vulnerabilities.
Right.
Are there any specific details about how these attacks are being carried out?
Yeah, there are some interesting observations from the Unit 42 threat brief.
Okay.
They noted that the attackers are using various techniques to try and evade detection.
Right, so they're trying to be stealthy.
Yeah, they're trying to be sneaky.
Okay.
One method they observed is called obfuscation.
Obfuscate.
Yeah, it's basically like scrambling code or data to make it difficult to understand.
So like writing a secret message in code?
Exactly.
Okay.
In Operation Lunar Peek, attackers were obfuscating their web shell payloads
Right.
to make them harder to analyze and detect.
That's pretty clever, but how can security professionals counter that? Is there a way to like unscramble the code?
Thankfully, there are techniques and tools for deobfuscation,
Oh.
which is essentially the process of reversing the obfuscation to reveal the hidden code.
Oh, so like having a code breaker on your team.
Exactly.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, it's an ongoing arms race between attackers and defenders.
Right. Are there any other sneaky tactics that we should be aware of? Any more surprises up the attacker's sleeve?
Well, the Unit 42 report also pointed out that attackers are increasingly using legitimate tools for malicious purposes.
Oh, wow. So it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Exactly. They're using tools that system administrators and security professionals use every day,
Right.
but for nefarious ends.
So how do you even defend against that? It seems like that would be really hard to spot.
It is challenging.
Uh-huh.
One approach is to carefully monitor the use of these legitimate tools and look for any suspicious activity.
Right. So having checks and balances in place.
Exactly. Making sure no one has too much unchecked power.
Okay.
And it comes back to that idea of a multi-layered defense. You need technology policies, procedures, and a culture of security awareness to effectively protect your organization from these evolving threats.
It's like building a fortress.
Yeah, with multiple layers of defense.
Walls, moats, guard towers, and vigilant soldiers.
Exactly.
Okay, but even with the best defenses, sometimes things slip through the cracks.
Right.
So what happens when a system is actually compromised? How do you contain the damage and recover?
That's where incident response comes in.
Okay.
You need a clear plan for how to react when a security breach occurs.
Right.
The first step is containment, isolating the affected systems to prevent the attacker from spreading further. Then you need to investigate what happened, how the attacker got in, and what data might have been compromised.
So it's like a digital crime scene investigation.
That's a great analysis.
Trying to piece together the clues.
Exactly.
And once you've contained the damage and understood the scope of the breach, then you can begin the remediation process.
Right, which involves cleaning up the infected systems, restoring data, patching vulnerabilities.
That sounds pretty complex and stressful.
It can be, but having a well-rehearsed incident response plan can make all the difference.
Okay, so preparation is key.
Absolutely. Don't wait until you're under attack to figure out what to do.
Right, and this brings us back to that idea of a collaborative approach that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Organizations need to share information about attacks, vulnerabilities, and mitigation strategies.
Exactly. The more we work together, the stronger our collective defenses become.
Right, and we need to keep in mind that this is an ongoing battle.
It is.
Attackers are constantly evolving their techniques.
Right.
And defenders need to evolve as well.
It's a never-ending arms race.
It sounds exhausting.
It can be, but it's also incredibly important work.
Right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive.
We have.
Exploring everything from the attacker's playbook to the importance of incident response and collaboration.
Yeah, we've delved deep into the technical details and the human factors that play a role in cybersecurity.
But there's still one crucial aspect that I want to explore, and that's the broader implications of these attacks
Right.
and what the future holds for cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've focused a lot on the how of these attacks,
Uh-huh.
but we also need to understand the why and the what next.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll zoom out to examine the bigger picture and explore the future of the cybersecurity landscape. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into these Palo Alto Networks vulnerabilities and this Operation Lunar Peek.
Right.
We've covered a lot of technical ground, but now I'm curious about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Like, what are the broader implications of these attacks?
Well, I think one of the things these events really highlight is how interconnected our digital world really is.
Yeah.
Um, a vulnerability in one widely used product like PAN-OS can have this ripple effect across countless organizations.
Right.
Um, it's a stark reminder, I think, that security is a shared responsibility. We all need to be vigilant, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of the entire digital ecosystem.
So, like, one weak link can bring down the whole system.
Exactly. It's a very delicate balance.
Right. Okay. So we've got this vulnerability, which is bad enough on its own.
Right.
But then it's being actively exploited in this campaign called Operation Lunar Peek.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about this operation? Like, is there anything that points to who might be behind it or what their motives are?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Unfortunately, the attackers behind Operation Lunar Peek have been very careful to cover their tracks.
Right.
There's been a lot of speculation.
Right.
But attributing these attacks with certainty is incredibly difficult. Some security experts believe that it could be a state-sponsored operation due to the level of sophistication and the targeting of critical infrastructure.
Right.
Others believe it could be a cybercrime group seeking financial gain,
Okay.
perhaps by stealing data or holding networks hostage for ransom.
So it's kind of a mystery for now.
It is a bit of a mystery at this point.
Yeah. But regardless of who's behind it, these attacks have real-world consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
We've talked about data breaches, system disruptions,
Right.
and the potential for attackers to use compromised firewalls as launching pads for further attacks.
Right.
But what about the long-term impact? How do these kinds of events shape the cybersecurity landscape going forward?
Well, I think one significant impact is the erosion of trust. When a trusted security product like PAN-OS is found to have critical flaws,
Right.
it shakes people's confidence in the entire industry.
That makes sense.
It's like finding out that the lock on your front door is faulty.
Yeah.
It makes you question the security of everything else.
If even the protectors can be compromised, then what's safe?
Exactly. And this erosion of trust can lead to a more cautious and skeptical approach to new technologies and security solutions.
Right.
It can also create this sense of urgency to improve security practices and invest in more robust defenses.
So it's kind of a wake-up call for the whole industry.
It is a wake-up call for sure.
Okay. Another long-term implication, I imagine, is the evolution of attacker tactics.
Oh, absolutely.
As defenders develop new ways to protect systems, attackers will inevitably find new ways to bypass those defenses.
It's a constant game of cat and mouse.
Sounds exhausting.
It can be, but it's also what makes this field so dynamic and challenging.
So what are some of the trends that you're seeing in this ongoing evolution of cyber attacks?
Well, one major trend is the increasing use of artificial intelligence
AI?
by both attackers and defenders.
Right.
AI-powered malware can be much more stealthy and adaptable,
Wow.
making it much harder to detect and block. But on the flip side, AI is also being used to develop more sophisticated security tools
Right.
that can analyze huge amounts of data
Okay.
to identify and respond to threats much more effectively.
So AI is like this double-edged sword in the cybersecurity world.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool that can be used for good or for evil.
Another trend, I imagine, is the expanding attack surface.
Oh, absolutely.
As organizations adopt cloud computing, mobile devices, the Internet of Things.
Right, the IoT.
Yeah, they're creating all these potential entry points for attackers.
Yeah, it's like building a bigger house with more doors and windows.
Right.
It becomes more challenging to secure.
And with more devices and systems connecting to the internet every day, that attack surface is only going to keep growing.
That's right. It's a constantly expanding attack surface.
Okay. And to make matters even more challenging, it seems like there's this huge shortage of cybersecurity professionals.
Yeah, that's a major concern.
The demand for skilled security experts seems to far outweigh the supply.
It does significantly.
Yeah. So we're facing more sophisticated attacks, a larger attack surface, and not enough people to defend it all.
It's a challenging situation for sure.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Well, it's definitely a challenge, but I'm still optimistic.
Okay.
We're seeing incredible innovation in the cybersecurity field
Right.
with new technologies and approaches emerging all the time.
Right.
We're also seeing a growing awareness of the importance of cybersecurity at all levels, from individuals to organizations to governments.
So people are finally starting to wake up to the fact that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility.
That's a crucial realization. And with increased awareness comes increased investment, collaboration, and hopefully more effective defenses.
That's reassuring. But I'm guessing there's no magic bullet here.
Yeah, unfortunately, no.
No single solution that will solve all of our cybersecurity problems.
There's no silver bullet. Security is an ongoing process. It's a journey, not a destination. It requires this multi-layered approach, a combination of technology, policies, procedures, and most importantly, a culture of security awareness.
So it's about building a cybersecurity mindset, making security a part of everything we do.
Exactly. We need to be vigilant, informed, and proactive in protecting ourselves and our organizations.
Well, that's a great message to end on.
Yeah.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opening experience for me.
For me too.
We've gone from the technical intricacies of these vulnerabilities to the broader implications of cyber attacks and the future of cybersecurity as a whole.
Yeah, we've explored the attacker's playbook, the importance of mitigations and incident response, and the need for collaboration and continuous learning.
It's a complex and ever-changing landscape, but by understanding the threats that we face, we can better protect ourselves and build a safer digital world.
I completely agree.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay secure.
Great advice.